Most historians have gotten the Siegfried Line story completely wrong. They show you the tanks, the firepower, the casualties, but they never show you what was really happening inside the minds of the German commanders watching Patton approach. And that's where the real battle was won. In the winter of 1944, General George S. Patton faced the Siegfried Line, 600 miles of reinforced concrete stretching across the German border like a scar. The German High Command had declared it impregnable. They believed it would hold for years. They had poured billions of marks into its construction. Concrete bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, machine gun nests, interlocking fields of fire, a wall built by a nation that believed in walls. But Patton understood something no other American general grasped in that moment. The belief that you cannot be defeated stops armies more effectively than any concrete fortress. And he would break that belief. This is not a story about military superiority. This is the story of how one man evaporated a supposedly unbreakable defensive line, not by breaking it, but by making it irrelevant. The Siegfried Line wasn't just concrete and steel. It was Hitler's promise to the German people. For 5 years, German generals had invested their reputation in it. They had written doctrine around it. They had trained entire armies to defend it. Every soldier in Germany believed that as long as this wall stood, the Americans could not reach the Rhine. It was more than a fortification. It was hope. It was security. It was the last assurance that Germany could not be conquered. When Patton arrived in early 1945, he saw what German commanders could not. Their greatest strength was actually their greatest weakness. German military doctrine was built on predictability. Dig in, fortify, wait for the enemy to break himself against your walls. Hold the line. It was systematic. It was methodical. It was rigid. It was unbreakable. Unless your enemy refused to attack it. German generals had trained for one scenario their entire careers. Enemy approaches. Enemy assaults. Enemy breaks on your fortifications. You counterattack. Order emerges from chaos. The line holds. This was the playbook they had rehearsed 1,000 times. German generals expected Patton to do exactly what every rational commander would do. Pause. Consolidate supplies. Bring up artillery. Assault the fortifications with overwhelming force. Siege the positions. They had prepared for this scenario. They had built defenses specifically for this moment. Patton had other plans entirely. Instead, he ordered something that violated every principle of military caution, every law of logistics, every rule of conventional warfare. He ordered his Third Army to attack not the fortifications, but the psychology behind them. He ordered relentless advance. No pause, no consolidation, no respect for the enemy's prepared positions. Just forward. Always forward. Faster than the German mind could process. This is where psychology becomes warfare. In February 1945, as Third Army approached the Siegfried Line near Koblenz, something extraordinary happened. German commanders defending some of the most fortified positions in the entire defensive line faced an impossible situation. Deep concrete bunkers, anti-tank obstacles stretching across fields, machine gun nests positioned for overlapping fire, positions designed according to every principle of defensive warfare. Positions that should have held for months. They collapsed in 72 hours. Not because Patton assaulted them, not because American artillery breached the concrete, but because Patton's columns were moving so fast, advancing 30 miles a day, that German commanders became convinced their forces would be surrounded and cut off from escape routes. Trapped, the psychological pressure of facing an enemy that didn't acknowledge their fortifications, that simply bypassed them and kept moving, became more devastating than any artillery barrage. Think about this from a German commander's perspective. You have spent years building these defenses. Your soldiers have trained for positional warfare. Your doctrine says, hold the line. Your superiors order you to hold the line. But the enemy is not attacking your line. The enemy is simply moving past it. Your fortifications become irrelevant because the battle is happening behind you. German commanders faced a calculation that had no textbook answer. Hold the position and accept encirclement, or abandon the fortifications and run. And run where? The Americans are advancing so fast they're already behind you. The choice becomes enclosed in concrete bunkers, cut off from supply and retreat routes, or exposed on the road, retreating toward a line that might not exist by the time you reach it. When you frame it that way, retreat becomes the only rational choice. The same scenario played out again near Trier in March 1945. German General Otto Hitzfeld defended the sector with 10,000 men in fortified positions designed to hold for months. But when Patton's columns crossed the Moselle and began moving north at 30 miles per day, Hitzfeld faced the same calculation: encirclement or retreat. Within 48 hours, he ordered a full retreat. His fortified positions, never assaulted directly, were simply abandoned. These weren't isolated incidents. They became the pattern. Again and again, German commanders faced the same calculation: hold and be surrounded. Retreat and survive to fight another day. A surrounded army is finished. A retreating army might regroup at the next defensive line. The psychological pressure was immense. German officers were trained to hold ground. Retreat meant failure. Retreat meant career devastation. But retreat meant survival. And survival was becoming the only victory available. Patton understood this better than any general of his era. He wasn't trying to capture fortifications. He wasn't trying to assault concrete bunkers. He was trying to make them irrelevant. He was creating a psychological situation where defending the fortifications became the worst possible option. Patton's orders were simple: never stop. Not for supplies, not to consolidate positions. Keep moving forward. What the German High Command received were reports that violated every principle of their doctrine. American forces appearing in locations that should be impossible. Tank columns advancing at speeds that violated logistics and physics. The American advance itself seemed to violate the laws of warfare. In that psychological void where doctrine provides no answer, where training covers no contingency, where the rulebook has been thrown away, fear takes over. Raw, primal fear. Not the fear of battle, but the deeper fear of watching your entire understanding of reality break down. German soldiers were brave. This wasn't about courage. German officers were trained. This wasn't about incompetence. German fortifications were real. This wasn't about inadequate defenses. But none of it mattered when confronted with an opponent who didn't acknowledge the rules they had spent decades learning. Patton had weaponized certainty. The certainty that his army could not be stopped. The certainty that rigidity would be punished. The certainty that every commander who stayed to defend a fortified position would be forgotten, cut off, captured or destroyed. That certainty, spreading from unit to unit, proved more destructive than any amount of firepower. What happened next reveals the true nature of Patton's victory. The Siegfried Line, declared impregnable by German strategists, didn't collapse from military assault. It collapsed from psychological erosion. The concrete remained intact. The bunkers still had guns. But the fortress ceased to exist because the men defending it no longer believed in it. For centuries, military academies taught that fortifications are broken by force. The Siegfried Line's collapse proved something different, that the strongest fortress is only as resilient as the confidence of those defending it. The moment that confidence disappears, the moment defenders believe they will be surrounded, that resistance is futile, the fortress becomes just concrete and steel. German commanders made rational decisions based on irrational circumstances. Hold the line and die surrounded. abandon the line, and maybe survive. The psychological mathematics always favored retreat. Patton didn't breach the Siegfried Line. He evaporated it. Units withdrew. Commanders panicked. The psychological anchor that had held German doctrine together began to fray. The certainty that brought confidence in fortifications shattered in moments. The Siegfried Line stood for months after Patton's breakthrough. The concrete was still intact, the guns still pointed outward. But the fortress that existed in the minds of German commanders, the belief that these walls would hold, had already fallen. German soldiers were brave. German fortifications were genuine obstacles. German doctrine was systematic. But none of it protected against a force that had rewritten the rules of warfare. An army that advanced 30 miles a day. An army that didn't acknowledge defensive positions. An army that moved with a momentum that felt like inevitability itself. This is the lesson that military history has spent 80 years misunderstanding. The war wasn't won on the battlefield. It was won when 30,000 German soldiers abandoned their fortified positions, not because they were defeated in battle, but because they believed they would be defeated if they stayed. The fortress fell not to firepower, but to fear. And fear, once it takes root in the minds of soldiers and commanders, becomes more powerful than any concrete ever poured. What Patton revealed was a truth that remains true today. The most impregnable walls are not built from concrete. They are built from belief, from the conviction that you cannot be beaten, from confidence in doctrine, from certainty in the future. And once that belief shatters, the wall ceases to exist, even if the concrete remains standing. The German High Command expected a conventional assault on the Siegfried Line. What they received instead was something far more devastating: the knowledge that convention no longer applied. That their fortifications protected nothing, that Patton's army was not bound by the limitations they had built their entire doctrine around. That realization, spreading from commander to commander, from unit to unit, proved more destructive than any bombardment. In the final analysis, Patton's breakthrough at the Siegfried Line represents a turning point in military history that most historians have fundamentally misunderstood. They credit it to his logistical genius. They credit it to American firepower. They credit it to overwhelming numerical superiority. But the real victory happened in a place no general can occupy with tanks or artillery. It happened in the minds of German commanders who suddenly realized their fortress had become a psychological trap, that their rigidity had become a liability, that their confidence in doctrine had blinded them to a new form of warfare that didn't follow the rules they had spent decades learning. The war isn't won on the battlefield. It's won in the moment when your enemy stops believing they can win.